Yes.
And so you were a fan of Brighton Rock coming up, and you finished the story.
Yeah, Brighton Rock, still to this day, love them to death. Brighton Rock was a band from Canada that just kicked my ass when I was 8 years old. Saw their video "We Came to Rock" on Much Music, and that was it. And I got obviously heavy into that band, and I love that band. And how do I make that story short?
You don't need to make it short. Just make it sweet.
Basically, they were they were my favorite band, along with, obviously, I loved Aerosmith and Rad and Poison and Tesla, all the bands from that late 80s hair metal movement, right? And, Brighton Rock were definitely a part of that. But what was great was they're from Ontario. They were from, they were always sold that they were from the Toronto area, but really they're from St. Catharines and Hamilton, Niagara Falls, that whole area, right? So I would always think that's so cool that my father worked at the time, we were living in Milton, but he worked in St. Catharines for Bell Canada. And, he would come home and say, so Derek, I went for lunch at, this bar called Ricky Joe's in St. Catharines, and, Stevie Screeves from Brighton Rock came in there. And of course I had a heart attack. Like, what? He was like, yeah, Stevie Screeves came in. That was the bass player from Brighton Rock. His girlfriend worked in there, and he signed you this picture. And I lost my mind. It said, "Keep rocking, Derek," and it had his signature, and it was just the coolest thing in the world. And I thought, how cool is that? My dad, ran into him there, and sometimes would run in. Obviously, would see Stevie's girlfriend at times. So there was this. I'm thinking, wow, one of my favorite bands. They're from that area, and my dad's run into them, and to make it even cooler. And Stevie did something incredible, as we talk about just being kind. They were writing their third record in Los Angeles with, ended up producing it was Garth Richardson. Remember Guga Garth?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Garth did the third record. No, sorry. Let me start again. Garth Richardson's father, Jack Richardson, who did the Guess Who, Jack produced their second record. But Garth engineered or helped engineer, I think, the first or second one with them or something like that. I could be messed up there, but they were friends with Garth. Anyways, why did I bring up Garth? Maybe that's my ADHD brain. Sorry.
Well, Jack Richardson produced it. Garth was his son.
Yeah, so I think I brought up Garth because I thought they were working on that record with him. But Toby Wright ended up doing the third record. So Toby Wright, of course, did Korn, and he did a lot of the nu metal bands. I know he produced Seven Dust record, Home.
Okay.
So he's a fantastic producer. I love Seven Dust too. Korn too. Great bands. But Brighton Rock, that's our story. So when they were writing their third record down in LA, they wrote me a postcard because my dad, gave them my address and didn't tell me this would happen because he didn't know if it would happen. But in the mail, I got this postcard with Brighton Rock's, promo photo on it. And I flipped it over. It was all signed by them. And it was a little note that Stevie wrote. This is probably the tail end of 1989. Basically saying, we're down here writing our next record, be good in school, that kind of, just a nice thing to write, and just to keep rocking, Derek, and all their autographs. And I was out of my mind. It was so incredible to get something sent to my home from my favorite band. So, the band, obviously, once grunge happened, the band kind of stopped playing. Greg ended up joining Helix, and the singer Jerry McGee, he was like the main guy they were considering for Motley Crue when Vince was fired.
Really?
Yeah. But they ended up going with John Corabi. Oh, John Corabi's amazing. So Jerry,
do you think that had anything to do with the Canadian American thing in terms of visas? Or?
No. But I think the fit with John just worked, I guess. And Jerry was the one that they were also considering. But Jerry ended up moving back to Canada because he had a young family at the time, and just made the decision to come back and kind of start and to do things. And so Brighton Rock was done by basically during that time in '92. And in '99, I was at the Burlington Mall with my girlfriend at the time, and we're just walking around, and this shows you how much of a nerd I am for music. This dude was walking by, and just from far, he had long hair, and he's walking with a girl. And I had literally just had this premonition thinking, that guy's cool. He's somebody. didn't know at the time that it was actually Mark Caverzan, the drummer of Brighton Rock, who, like I told you, I'm a big drum fan, and I wanted to be a drummer. I wanted to be Mark Caverzan when I was a kid. I used to sit with pillows when I was 10 years old, pounding on pillows, trying to be a drummer, watching Brighton Rock videos and Aerosmith and Rat and all that stuff.
You know what's funny about that is that's a great way to practice. Actually, in that closet, I have a pillow that I taped up that I used to bring on tour with me.
That's a cool thing.
And use it as like a practice pad, because if you can learn how to work with that kind of resistance, yeah, anyway, sorry, sidetrack.
Cool. Well, I didn't do it that way. I just set up pillows where I could, and I would sit, when all these other kids at 10 were, supposed to be out doing kid stuff. I was inside studying all the moves from Power Hour at the time. That shows you how old I am, right? But, yeah, so then about an hour later after I saw him from far, I see him walk out of an elevator at the mall, and I literally just stopped dead in my tracks, and I look at him and go, "You're Mark Caverzan from Brighton Rock." And he just kind of stopped and looked at me. He's like, yeah, I am. Now, mind you, it's been, 6-7 years since the band had broken up, and he moved on to some other bands and stuff. And I go, "Dude, like, you have no idea how much I love your band." And poor guy, probably scared him, because here I am. I'm taller than him. I had a shaved head at the time. I'd cut all my long hair off years prior to that. I probably scared him because I was so excited to meet one of my biggest fucking music heroes. My first guitar riff was Brighton Rock's Power Overload. So it was a cool thing that happened. But we hit it off. We started talking. I told him how much I love the band and asked him what he'd been up to. And we connected, and we literally stood there for an hour talking, and our girlfriends just kind of, supported the whole thing. And I was just trying to keep myself together because I was fanboying like crazy. I had a hard time keeping it together because I was so excited to meet him. And he did something amazing. He passed me his business card because he was working for, it was like a company. He's with Dario now.
Oh, okay.
But he was with like some drum company, and he's like, "Yeah, man, keep in touch. Come see my band, Nude 101." He was playing with this awesome, hard rock band out of Toronto. And I thought, how cool is that, right? Like, he's passed me his number. I might have a chance to see him play someday, and that happened. So I reached out to him, and we started talking, and I just started asking him questions about the band back in the day, and he found out that I was a musician, and I had Hexus going at the time, and he was very supportive to Hexus. I gave him our CDs, and so he knew I could play and all that stuff. But obviously, the Hexus music was a different style than Brighton Rock. Brighton Rock were kind of like a blend of like Van Halen and a bit of Priest and a bit of AC/DC and Scorpions, kind of all melded into one, right? In a way. They had their own style for sure.
But your chops still shone through in Hexus, right? So anyone who's knows that, okay, it's maybe not the same style of music, but clearly this cat can fucking play, right?
Oh, thanks. Well, I tried to put those little squawk harmonics in and little solos here where I could, but yeah, the riffing was definitely different, but Mark could tell that I could play. So that was obviously in his mind when the band got back together and reunited. By this time, this is 2001. Brighton Rock got together to do a reunion show, and by then, Mark and I had always kept in touch. I'd come out to see him play with different bands, and became a friend of mine, which is really, really cool. Every time my phone rang, it would say Mark Caverzan. I go, oh my god, like,
yeah,
I got a chance to talk to this guy, and he's such an incredible guy and such an incredible musician, and yeah, it's awesome. So, anyways, they got back together to do a reunion show, and of course I was there. It was awesome. Went with my buddies, and of course Daryl from Hexus, my brother came. All of us were down. This is awesome. Helix was there. It was really cool. And then they did a couple other shows locally, and then all of a sudden they signed with this label Z Records out of England, and they had their first gig back in England. They hadn't played in England since like 1989, and they had this gig booked, and it was in May of 2002, and of all things, Greg Fraser, the guitar player, wasn't able to do the gig. And Mark calls me, and this is about 3 months before the show, and he goes, "I got a question for you." And I go, "Yeah, what's going on?" Of course, I have no idea, right? This is going to even come up. "What are you doing in May?" And I instantly knew their gig was happening. I'm thinking, oh, is he going to ask? And my mind's going fast, right? Is he going to want me to be a roadie? That's cool.
Yeah.
He goes, "Listen, Greg can't play the show, man. Would you come and play guitar for us in England?"
That's fucking wild.
And literally, dude, I was like, "What?" I was just goosebumps. I, almost shit myself. Like, are you kidding me? Yes. What? Like, that's insane. And then I realized I'm supposed to be my friend's best man on that weekend.
Oh, no.
And I'm thinking, how do I pass up a chance of a lifetime to play with my childhood heroes at the Z-Rock Fest, in Manchester, England, with a bunch of other bands that I grew up listening to as well. It was insane. And
I feel like he would have to understand. You just got to go do that, man.
This guy, Jim, was a fan of Brighton Rock when he was a kid.
Okay.
So he understood, and he was very understanding. So that was really cool. And I unfortunately did have to miss his wedding, but that experience was an incredible thing. So I got to rehearse with them, which was insane. The excitement for that was awesome. And I was, I think, 23 at the time. And I wish, I wish I played better. I was very nervous to do that, and to cover Greg's parts wasn't easy, even though I was such a big fan of them. But yeah, to go and experience that and play the songs I grew up listening to, like the very first guitar riff, the one I learned when I was 11, taught by my amazing teacher, Randy, I ended up playing that song with the band in another part of the world. It was crazy.
That's wild, man.
It was awesome, man. And I was I was a part of the autograph session. So there I am signing records that I wasn't on. And I would tell the crowd, the fans, like, I'm not this guy. Like, I'm the fan like you are.
Yeah.
I'm getting this chance to play with these fuckers. And they're
Which is even cooler from their vantage point, man. It's like, yeah, we were saying on the break, like, it's like Rockstar, like the movie.
Well, they kept joking about that, the band itself. They're like, it's kind of like the movie Rockstar. I'm thinking, it's kind of like that. It's crazy. And then the fans were so amazing. There were fans there that couldn't speak English, man. Like, there were people that, here we are in England, and there's fans from Spain, France, Scandinavia, different parts of Europe, and some of them literally could not speak English, but they were just so happy to see Brighton Rock and talk to us. And even when I would say, like, I'm not this guy, like, I'm the, I'm filling in on guitar, like, we don't care. I was so honored, literally. Like, it was amazing I felt silly putting my name on some of these stuff, because I didn't play on the record, but I grew up listening to those records.
But it's kind of inspiring in and of itself, right? I mean, that fan now knows, maybe I too can join the band, even for a show that I love. Like,
well, yeah. And I was very honest with them too. I mean, I had to do an interview for it as well, and I was very honest about my position. This is where I got to do this. And I'm thinking in my head, in a couple of days, I'll be back on my forklift, doing my normal job, and then playing with, Hexus was kind of becoming a different band by that time, but that's what I had on the go, back home, obviously. And it was incredible. And the people were so nice. And I remember, I'll never forget, we finished our gig. We went backstage. And when we went backstage, we had to leave the stage and go straight behind the stage to go behind. And this fan must have snuck back there. And he walked back there with us and kind of followed us. And he was really excited. And I'm looking at him going, that's kind of how I am, right? But he went a little overboard and just wouldn't, he was just glued to us. But it was cool. But he really couldn't speak a lot of English. So I just thought, he obviously loves his band so much. Like, I just looked at him and said, dude, it's cool, man. To kind of calm him, because he was just shaking. He was so excited. I said, dude, I'm like you, man. I'm a big fan. I'm just happy to be here. And he's like, yeah, Brighton Rock. He was just so excited. So we did pictures, and I gave him my pick that I use on stage. And it's like, he looked at it like it was the coolest thing in the world. And I was so honored, but really, I just looked at him like, that's how I am. I just so excited. So it was just so neat that he was so jacked on that. It was just a trip. It was like I was in a dream. And then literally when he walked away, I'm like, okay, I'll see you out there, when we come back out. As I was walking out, who's stretching out and warming up behind me is Jeff Scott Soto. So I don't know if you know who he is, but Jeff Scott Soto was the lead singer for Yngwie Malmsteen in the 80s.
Really?
And he actually he sang in Journey in 2006.
Really?
Yeah, when Steve Augeri,
so
who
he
replaced
wasn't
Steve
like
Perry.
the young kid that they did the documentary on.
No, that's Arnel Pineda.
Okay.
So Jeff Scott Soto, the reason he got to play in Journey was, so when Steve Perry did not, he left Journey in, I think it was 97 or early 98 after their Trial by Fire record, which is a great record, by the way. They got Steve Augeri. Sounds similar, except Steve's Italian and Steve Perry is Portuguese. Yes. See, I know this stuff. It's crazy. I'm just weird. But Steve Augeri I think he blew his voice out in that year. He had a tough time with his voice. I mean, imagine you're singing Steve Perry stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine there's very many people that can do that.
So Steve needed a break. So Neil Sean, the guitar player, brought in Jeff Scott Soto because they had a band together on the side. And Jeff Scott Soto, I mean, he's like the band he's in right now is with like Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater and Bubblefoot from GNR and
really
Derek Sherinian from Dream Theater.
Yeah, like they're really
and Billy Sheehan on the bass. Like,
holy
dude.
shit!
Yeah, so
what's that band called?
Sons of Apollo. It's crazy stuff. But
I gotta write that down.
Yeah, it's nuts. But Jeff Scott Soto was warming up to go on stage with his band, and his band was I'm trying to remember their name, but their bass player was the original bass player in Europe, and he was a bass player for Yngwie Malmsteen, Marcel Jacobs. I think they were called Humanimal. Anyways, dude, Jeff was so nice, and I had to walk up to Jeff because you're talking about the Rockstar movie. There it is. Jeff Scott Soto is the voice of. Remember, so Mark Wahlberg's voice is actually Mike Matijevic from Steelheart. Okay, that's the real voice is Mike. But the original singer of that Rockstar band, whatever they were called, Steel Dragon. So the original singer, that voice was Jeff Scott Soto.
Oh, really?
So Jeff's voice is on Rockstar. And that movie had come out just before we did the England show. So I got to go up to Jeff. And I said, Jeff, I'm a big fan of you since the Yngwie days. And, he did backup vocals on Striper Records and stuff. I'm like, wow, man, you're awesome. He's like, he was really nice. And he's a super talented musician. So pretty crazy to have this a moment on stage with Brighton Rock. And then there's this dude that I listened to as a kid. And then later on, some other musicians that I liked as a kid, they were there. It was just really, really cool experience. And, this is in 2002, right? So I think 5 years later, I was supposed to play with them in Germany later that year, but Greg was able to do the show. So, so obviously he played. And, about 4 years later, Greg started looking at bringing me into Phrase Gang, which is his side band, which included Stevie from Brighton Rock and their drummer, Phil Lepp, an awesome drummer from Niagara Falls. And it was around 2007 that I actually started playing and rehearsing with them. And then and that was around the time I joined Dead Celebrity. So I was kind of juggling those bands. But it was a great experience. We ended up cutting a record, Phrase Gang 2. And that was a wicked experience. It was, mixed by Beau Hill. Beau Hill was the guy that produced Twisted Sister, Rat, Winger, Warrant.
Wow.
Kicks. I think he did Kicks. He did Europe. He did all these incredible bands, all the bands I grew up listening to, basically. Some of my favorite records were made by Beau Hill and, Rat. He did all those bands, and he got to mix the stuff I played on. It was crazy.
That is nuts,
It was really cool, man. And, unfortunately, Phrase Gang, after our CD released show, we haven't played since, and this is in 2012 because Brighton Rock got back together again.
Okay, so it wasn't anything internal, like everything was cool. It was just scheduling conflicts.
Yeah, the demand for Brighton Rock came up again, which is great. And so my role changed. When Brighton Rock started playing again, I just became their stage tech and their help. I helped them out because
so
I love those guys.
You still get to work with the band.
Yeah. So many times when they'd be playing, unless they went overseas for some shows, I couldn't obviously be there. But yeah, here I'd go there and just be their guy, just help them, do the set. I know what the guitar sounds have to be and, how the gear has to be set up, and just did all that. Just basic stuff. Nothing crazy.
That's cool though.
But it was cool to be a part of it because I love those guys. And
yeah.
I have no problem being there to help lug gear and get things set up and make sure that they're good and set up and going.
I would love to do something like that.